Are you ready to explore the darkest corners of human history? Do you dare to delve into some of the most brutal and horrifying execution methods ever devised? From ancient civilizations to the medieval era, humans have crafted ingenious yet utterly cruel ways to inflict punishment upon one another. Prepare to be shocked and intrigued as we uncover the gruesome details of these 10 worst torture methods in human history. Death by 1,000 cuts. Lingqi. Lingqi, also known as death by 1,000 cuts, sounds like a terrifyingly slow way to go. It's like they were playing a game of how many paper cuts can you withstand before you call it quits. Lingqi, also known as death by 1,000 cuts, was a particularly cruel form of execution practiced in ancient China from the Tang dynasty to the final years of the Qing. The condemned were tied to a post and subjected to numerous cuts to their flesh, starting from the chest and continuing to the arms and thighs. The process aimed for a slow, agonizing death rather than a swift one. Victims often died from shock or blood loss, and their limbs were severed and collected in a basket. Lingqi was reserved for the most severe crimes such as treason and murder. While some executions lasted only minutes, others dragged on for hours, depending on factors like the depth of incisions and the skill of the executioner. Families could sometimes pay to expedite the process for their relatives. Despite Western sensationalism, Lingqi was a real and brutal practice, with one documented case being the execution of Fu Choli in 1905, captured on film before the method was outlawed. But let's not forget, despite the grim humor, Lingqi was a real and brutal practice, not just a twisted tale from the history books. Sawing. During the Middle Ages, the saw was like the Swiss Army knife of torture, versatile, efficient, and terrifyingly effective. You could say it was the cutting-edge technology of its time. Imagine being tied upside down like a human piñata, waiting for the blood to rush to your head while someone wields a saw below. Talk about a real head-turner of a torture method. And if you thought your suffering would end quickly, think again. Some unlucky souls had to endure hours of being slowly sliced and diced, all for crimes like witchcraft or adultery. But hey, at least they got a front row seat to the gruesome show, right? And let's not forget, during the Inquisition, when torture devices were in short supply, the saw was the budget-friendly option for all your confession-extracting needs. Crucifixion. Crucifixion, the original hanging out session. Talk about a real nail-biter. It was like the ancient version of a public roast, but with way more stakes involved. Crucifixion, an ancient method of execution, involved binding and nailing the victim's hands and feet to a cross. It was considered one of the most painful and disgraceful forms of capital punishment, practiced extensively by the Romans, but also used in various other cultures. Victims, usually slaves or criminals, endured beatings, torture, and the humiliation of carrying their own cross to the execution site. Once affixed to the cross, victims suffered prolonged agony from restricted breathing and circulation, leading to exhaustion, suffocation, and eventual death from heart failure. Sometimes, mercy was shown by breaking the victim's legs to hasten death. Crucifixions were conducted in public places as a deterrent to crime, with charges posted on the cross above the victim's head, and the bodies were often left hanging as a further display of punishment. Boiling. Boiling to death, the original hot tub party, gone horribly wrong. It's like the ultimate spa treatment, except instead of relaxation, you get a first-hand experience of your own body becoming soup. Boiling to death was a common method of execution in past centuries, used for crimes ranging from treason to forgery. It made a comeback in the 16th century, notably under Henry VIII's reign in Britain. Richard Roos, a cook, was the first man publicly boiled to death in Britain for allegedly poisoning his employer's food. This method, intended to be slow and excruciating, involved placing victims in a large vat of boiling liquid, such as water, oil, wax, or lead. Victims would suffer for hours as their bodies cooked from the outside in, experiencing blistering, burns from steam inhalation, and the nauseating smell of their own flesh cooking. Although boiling as a form of execution is no longer practiced, accidental deaths by boiling can still occur today, as evidenced by a tragic incident in Yellowstone National Park in 2016. The Catherine wheel, the breaking wheel, where every rotation brings a new meaning to the phrase breaking news. It's like the ultimate medieval spin class, except instead of toning your abs, it tones your bones. Talk about getting your daily dose of vitamin D for dread. The breaking wheel, or the Catherine's wheel, was reserved for the most heinous criminals and designed to inflict maximum pain and suffering. Victims were either broken by the wheel or broken on it, enduring hours or even days of agony as their bones were systematically shattered. Originating in the Roman Empire, the wheel was initially used as a tool to inflict pain, typically on slaves and Christians. Over time, it evolved into a method of execution for various crimes, from treason to murder. During the Middle Ages, the wheel was extensively employed across Europe and parts of Asia, with variations in methodology. Executioners would strike victims multiple times, weaving their broken bodies through the wheel's spokes or rotating the wheel while delivering fatal blows. The breaking wheel persisted as an execution method until the 19th century, with notable cases of its use, such as the executions of Count de Horn and the Chevalier de Mille in 1720 Paris. Despite its eventual decline, the breaking wheel remains one of history's most gruesome and horrifying execution methods. Impalement. Impalement, the original pointy end goes in the other guy strategy, turning a sharp argument into a real pain in the, well, everywhere. It's like the world's worst game of pin the tail on the donkey, except the donkey is you, and the tail is a giant stake. Impalement, a brutal method of execution, involves piercing a victim's body with a sharpened stake, resulting in a grotesque and agonizing death. This technique has been employed throughout history, with notable examples including Vlad the Impaler in the 15th century and the Assyrian Empire in ancient times. There are variations of impalement, including transverse and longitude impalement, as well as launching victims onto a bed of spikes. Impalement has been used as a means of punishment, intimidation, and domination, with instances recorded in ancient Mesopotamia and during the Ottoman Empire's conflicts. The effectiveness of impalement as a form of punishment has been documented in historical accounts, reflecting its gruesome and enduring legacy. Flaying. Flaying, the original DIY skincare routine gone horribly wrong, turning exfoliation into a life-threatening ordeal and shedding layers like a peeled potato. Who knew getting a full-body wax could be so brutal? It's like the ultimate makeover, but instead of silky smooth skin, you end up looking like a horror movie extra. Flaying, an ancient torture method, has been practiced in various regions including the Middle East, Africa, and America. During the Middle Ages, it was commonly used to torture and execute criminals, soldiers, and alleged witches. In one form of flaying, the victim's skin was slowly peeled off using a small knife, starting from the face and working down to the feet. Another method involved exposing the victim to the sun to redden the skin before flaying. Some cultures believed that human skin had magical properties or used human body parts to signify social status. Flaying was a brutal and agonizing form of punishment that often resulted in death before completion. Rat torture. Rat torture, the original rat race taken to the extreme, turning nightmares into reality with a twist of horror movie flair. Who knew these little critters had a side gig as professional interrogators, making even the Spanish Inquisition cringe? It's like a scene straight out of Night of the Living Rats. Rat torture, a gruesome interrogation method, has been practiced throughout history in various forms. Originating as far back as the Roman Empire under Emperor Nero, rats were used to terrorize and harm prisoners. In medieval London, the Tower of London had a dungeon dedicated to rat torture, where prisoners were submerged in rising water infested with rats. The method evolved over time, with one of the most sinister variations emerging during the Dutch Revolt, involving placing a cage of rats over a victim's abdomen and heating the metal cage to force the rats to burrow into the victim's flesh. This method was reportedly used well into the 20th century by dictators like Augusto Pinochet in Chile and military juntas in Argentina. Though specific documented cases are rare, rat torture remains one of the most horrifying interrogation techniques in history. Brazen bull. The brazen bull, where screaming meets mooing in a twisted duet of agony, turning a barbecue into a macabre performance art. The brazen bull, a horrifying torture device, was created for the tyrant Phalaris by his sculptor, Perilaus. This brass bull, hollow and equipped with pipes and whistles, was placed over a fire, roasting victims alive inside, while their screams were converted into bull-like sounds. While the legend vividly depicts Phalaris as a cruel ruler, historical accuracy remains uncertain, though references by Cicero and Diodorus Siculus add credibility. Perillus himself allegedly faced the bull's fiery wrath after demonstrating its use. Whether fact or fiction, the tale of Phalaris and the brazen bull stands as a chilling legend from ancient Greece. The boats, scaphism. Scaphism, where milk and honey turn into a nightmare buffet for bugs and vermin, creating a sticky situation akin to drowning in dessert. It's like a twisted version of a spa day, where instead of relaxation, there's just pure horror. This ancient Persian method of torture and execution, also known as the boats, involved placing the victim between two boats with their head, hands, and feet exposed. Force-fed large amounts of milk and honey to attract insects and vermin, the victim endured excruciating pain as they were slowly eaten alive by bugs and infected wounds while left to bake in the sun for days. This torturous ordeal, lasting for several days, saw the victim returning to the boats each day if they survived. Ultimately, their body would be disposed of after being eaten and rotted down to the bones. Scaphism remains a gruesome and horrific way to die. And there you have it, folks. The 10 most brutal and downright bizarre execution methods in history. Whether you're laughing in disbelief or cringing in horror, one thing's for sure. Human creativity knows no bounds, even when it comes to inventing ways to make someone's day go from bad to worse. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more mind-blowing content. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride, and until next time, stay curious.